Welcome everybody. First thing, giving a thank you to Alana for organizing this and welcoming me into your guys' space in this
Yeah, sure.
support group. My name is Kai, my pronouns are they, them, and I work for the City of Boston's Disability Commission as their accessibility and inclusion training specialist. So my job is to do exactly this, reach out to different groups across the city and do even trainings within the City of Boston, employees, schools, etc. So I'm really happy to be here today, and we're going to go over some different things involving accessibility, where you can go if you have a complaint, and a little bit about your rights as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so what you can expect this training, we're going to provide just a brief explanation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, titles 1 through 5, and then who to contact if you have a grievance, as well as, again, I mentioned some of your rights. Okay, so what is the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act? This is a civil rights law that was passed in 1990 and prohibits discrimination based on disability. And there is a specific definition that the ADA uses for disability. So this is having a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity, having a record or history of an impairment, such as cancer that's in remission, or being perceived by others as having an impairment, such as a person who has scars from a severe burn. So this means even if you don't personally identify as being disabled, but somebody else perceives you as being disabled, you still are protected underneath this law. So I think that's pretty cool because not everyone identifies as being disabled, and that's fine. But if somebody is discriminating against you because they think that you're disabled, you are protected. All right, so we're going to go through the 5 titles, and then after this section, I'll leave some room for some questions. So for Title I, that's employment. This prohibits disability-based discrimination and requires covered employees to provide reasonable accommodations for applicants and employees with disabilities. So that means from posting the job to filling out the application to the job interview to the hiring process to the onboarding process, through everything that you do in your day-to-day work all the way until the end of your employment at whatever place you're working at. All of those things are protected, and you cannot be discriminated against as a disabled person or somebody who is regarded as being disabled under this employment. So if you have a complaint about something you think that you're being discriminated against, the first line of defense is to go to the Office of Human Resources for wherever your place of employment is. And since we're in the state of Massachusetts, it can then be escalated to the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. And then even more so, if that doesn't help, you can go further and go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and then finally the Department of Justice. All right, so Title II, which is mainly what our office in the city of Boston focuses on, is state and local government. So the city of Boston being a local government, this prohibits state and local government entities from refusing participation for persons with disabilities in services, programs, activities, or requiring that they participate in certain services that are specifically designed for people with disabilities. So they may offer those services, but they cannot force somebody to take advantage of them. It also requires effective communication for persons with disabilities. So this means that if somebody requires a sign language interpreter, or maybe a document that's in Braille, or closed captions or anything of that nature, that entity is required to give that accommodation to be sure that they're effectively communicating with every type of person within their jurisdiction. So again, to file a complaint, because it is the city of Boston, if you live in the city of Boston, that's where you would go. If you're not in the city of Boston, then you can go directly to whatever city that you're in. Most cities have some sort of disability commission office or some sort of office that you can file a complaint with, so that you would go. And then again, because we're in Massachusetts, you can also contact the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, and again, the Department of Justice. There's also the MOD, which is the Massachusetts Office on Disability. And again, since we're in the state of Massachusetts, that's a great resource as well. All right, so Title III is your public accommodations. So that is restaurants, grocery stores, hotels, businesses, banks, anything that doesn't fall under basically like a government entity. So all of your public places. And this requires them to all be accessible. So all new constructions and renovations have to be fully ADA compliant. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means later in the presentation. But existing barriers, if they can't be like readily removed, there has to be a plan in order to make it accessible. So if it can be readily removed, go ahead and do that, which again, we'll talk about later on in the presentation. But if it can't, there has to be a plan in place to make that so. If there's a complaint with the building, the architecture of that building, there's a couple of places that you can go first, and that would be either the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination or the Architectural Access Board would be one of the other. And then you could escalate that to the Department of Justice as well. Title IV is telecommunications, so that's TVs, phones, etc. They have to be accessible for callers and folks who are consuming the media who are deaf or hard of hearing or with speech-related disabilities. So that's like your closed captioning, talk to text type things, TTY, all that good stuff. And again, to file a complaint, it's going to be a pretty common thread. We're in Massachusetts, so the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, followed by the Federal Communications Commission, and then again, the Department of Justice. So Department of Justice is pretty much always going to be your absolute last line of defense, and you're mostly going to start with either the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, or if you're within the city of Boston, that would be our office. And finally, Title V, miscellaneous, that's pretty much everything else. Prohibits coercion, threatening, retaliating against individuals with disabilities, or if somebody is acting as your advocate, it protects them as well. So if you feel that you're discriminated specifically or coerced, threatened, etc., retaliated against, or somebody who has been helping you is experiencing that, you can again go to the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, and then followed by the Department of Justice. So now we'll go into a little bit about what our office does specifically as a summary. We aim to increase opportunities for persons with disabilities across the city of Boston. And we do this by ensuring full and equal participation in all aspects of life. So we want to remove barriers in policies, procedures, programs, buildings, services, communications, and attitudes as well. All right, so these are some of the different ways that we accomplish what I mentioned before. So one program that we have is called the On-Street Accessible Parking Program. If you've seen, within the city of Boston, those signs that designate accessible parking for vehicles that have either a placard or a plate, that's our office. We oversee the installation of these parking spots in front of businesses and neighborhoods and residents and things like that. We also have an architectural access team, and this team works specifically to ensure that the built environment in Boston is going beyond minimum ADA compliance. So they work hard, small but mighty team that works to make sure that things like ramps, doors, sidewalks, etc., all the architecture within the city of Boston, built environment is as accessible as possible and goes just above and beyond. We also have community engagement. We have an outreach coordinator who works to get people involved in the things that we're doing. So does outreach for our events, our different sort of meetings and things like that. We have a newsletter that you can join, which there'll be more information at the end of the presentation about how to sign up for that. And we also give out like referrals and information for different things that you might need within the city of Boston related to disability. And finally, we have our commission board, which is made up of 13 Boston residents appointed by the mayor, and it keeps the city kind of informed about local businesses within or local issues within the disability community. These are open events that anyone can attend. Bring something to the board if you would like to bring attention to it. And they have a system of voting on what topics there are talked about during each meeting. These meetings are recorded, and minutes are posted as well. So it's all public information, but it's welcome for anyone to attend, both within the city of Boston, and of course, if you live outside, you can come as well. But it is a city of Boston focused board. And then we also work on systemic access. So we work with a lot of other departments. It's not just us in a little, bubble. We have partnerships with a lot of city departments that kind of go hand in hand with things such as like parks or excuse me, HR or like different aspects of what life in the city might be about. So we provide technical assistance regarding Title II compliance. So if there's an office or department within the city that isn't compliant or they're not sure how to be compliant or if they have questions, they can come to us. We also do trainings just like this one on various topics. So we do it not only within the City of Boston departments, but also to support groups, to schools, different organizations, anything like that to help make things easier to understand and also make it very clear where you should go if you have an issue and just provide a little bit of extra education that might not be on the ADA website or things like that. We also have some materials like paper material for things like accessibility checklists, make sure that your events, your outreach, and your meetings are all accessible, as well as one-pagers on things like service dogs or our program that I mentioned earlier with the on-street parking spots, things like that. Our architectural access team works to review plans for street and sidewalk construction. They design reviews of city-owned buildings, schools, libraries, etc. Just again, going back to all of the built environment of the city of Boston, they review things like that. And they also review large-scale private construction projects such as office buildings, housing developments, hospitals, colleges, and more. So we've got a lot going on in this office here to try to make sure that Boston is not only compliant, but just goes beyond what is the minimal necessary for compliance. We want it to be even more accessible and inclusive. This section is all about best practices to support accessibility for all types of disabilities. So when we talk about accessibility, this is when needs of people who are disabled are specifically considered. And products, services, and facilities are built or modified so that they can be used by people of all abilities. So when they are modified, this is called accessibility. There's different types of accessibility. Different types of accessibility. So you might see physical or sensory accessibility. Physical accessibility might look like things like a stair or obstacle-free route, curb ramps, accessible parking spots, passenger loading zones, elevators, signage, etc. Just anything that makes the environment physically accessible, physically able to navigate, whether you are, using a walker, a chair, if you have a service dog, anything like that, that's physical accessibility. Sensory accessibility there's different definitions of what this might mean. It's kind of been debated, but in some instances, it might include things like quiet rooms, low and warm lighting for people who have sensory sensitivities. Also things like single stall bathrooms, so that folks can not have to be I guess, in an environment that might be a little bit noisier with multiple stalls and things like that. So these are some examples of what physical and sensory accommodations might look like. Tactile warnings on, on those ramps or crosswalks, warm and low lighting areas, bathrooms and parking that is accessible. So those loading, those van accessible spots, loading zones, and bathroom stalls that are larger, that have the bars on them for being able to help with mobility, ramps and elevators, and as well as use of headphones in shared spaces for folks who might have some sensory to loud noises. Communication accessibility is another type of accessibility that sometimes it can be called sensory as well. But this involves things like hearing, speaking, reading, writing, vision, etc., processing that sort of information. And they need communication access accommodations. So this might look like large print, closed captions, a sign language interpreter, braille, alternative text for images so that you can use a screen reader, and digital copies of certain things, again, is most beneficial for someone who might use a screen reader. What makes a building accessible? So for entrances, this means no steps or a ramp. It's inaccessible if there are steps and there's not a ramp. Clear signage if it's not the main entrance. So we want to make sure that if it's the accessible entrance, it's not like hidden in the back somewhere with no signs and how to get to it. Like you want to clearly outline, the building should clearly outline what route to take if you need to get to the ramp or accessible entrance. Doors should be clear width of 32 inches with a maximum force to open of 5 pounds for the interior and 15 pounds for the exterior. So that's pretty technical, and just basically means if you have a doubt about whether a door is too heavy or not, you can, again, when we talk about the slides earlier about where to go to report, that would be something that you can report to like the architectural access board and say, I think this door might be too heavy for an internal door. It feels like more than 5 pounds, things like that. Also handles, levers, and push bars. U-shape handles are much better than just knobs. It can be difficult for folks, some folks who can't, form a fist to be able to open a knob. So that's why push bars or that kind of being able to just like pull it down sort of handle is much better, more accessible. And accessible routes have to be 36 inches or 3 feet wide and to all areas open to the public. So this means that if there's, a bench area that doesn't have that, accessible route, that's not compliant. It needs to, if it's open to the public, it needs to be accessible. So for parking spaces, there's approximately one designated accessible space per every 25 non-accessible spaces, and one must be van accessible. And for medical facilities, this is about 10% of their parking lots have to be designated accessible spaces. Protruding objects, so this means that something is coming out from a building or a sidewalk or something like that. If it's 4 inches or more from the wall, it should be detectable by a cane, a white cane, so that people aren't running into it, knocking their head into it or their leg or something like that. And service counters are the lower ones are more accessible, or a section of the counter to be no more than 36 inches is the most accessible. These are the steps to take for businesses versus a city building versus a state or federal building. So I think this is probably where the most interest is because there's an issue, you want to know where to go to let someone know and have it fixed. So for private buildings, the first line of defense is talking to the owner. You want to document the information, so date, time, description, location, and taking pictures if you're able to, maybe even a video, and then fill out the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board complaint form. So filling out that complaint form, an investigation will be performed, and then a hearing might be scheduled. For city and state buildings, again, document the information. So all the same, date, time, location, pictures, description, all that good stuff. Fill out a complaint form, an investigation is performed, and a hearing may be scheduled. So for private buildings and city state buildings, it really is the same. Whereas for federal buildings, you want to file the complaint through the U.S. Access Board. So that's really the only difference. So private buildings, city and state, pretty much the same protocol. And for federal buildings, you want to go through the U.S. Access Board. We'll go on to accessibility specifically for parking, which is great. I heard, quite a few questions about that. And even in the email that Alana sent, there were some questions about parking. So I'm glad that we're able to go over that. But so for eligibility specifically, we'll talk first about being able to park in or use an accessible spot. So to do that, I'm sure that most of you know that you have to have a placard or a license plate. Both drivers and passengers are eligible to apply. And that's through the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles Affairs. So again, these links will be sent out in an email to Alana, but you can fill out an application. They'll probably ask for some information like, doctor information and things like that. And once you get approved, then you'll be able to park in an accessible spot. If you believe that someone is abusing a placard or plate, you can report them to the RMV, which again, this link will be provided. There's a form that you can fill out and then they will go and follow up on that. So for parking lots, all parking lots in Massachusetts are required to have accessible spaces, including van accessibility. There's a whole page on with more information about what those specifics are. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but the Massachusetts Office on Disability has a lot more information. And accessible spaces have to have access aisles that provide space for wheelchairs. So if you come across a spot that maybe is labeled as accessible, but in order to get up to the actual sidewalk, there's a step or a lip or something like that. That would definitely be a complaint versus if it just has clear path with a ramp there. For on-street accessible parking spots, all municipalities in Massachusetts are required to have on-street parking spots that are accessible if they have on-street parking in general. So if they have open on-street parking, they must have accessible spots as well. If you're a Boston resident, you can apply for one with our program, either in front of our house, or you can even refer a business if you see that they need, some spots on the street in front of their business. We do have a separate application for businesses as well. So you're always welcome to refer them to us if you think that they might benefit from, or that folks would benefit from having a spot in front of a business on the street. And yeah, for parking tickets, so this goes back to that question that was asked earlier. I totally forgot this was in the presentation, so I'm glad that it is. But if you receive a parking ticket in the city of Boston, you can appeal it. And then disabled people can drop into City Hall for an appeal rather than scheduling it. So it doesn't specify, if the ticket has to be paid or not, but there is an appeal process, which is we always encourage folks to go through. And then meters, any vehicle with a disability plate or a placard can park at the meters free with no time limit. So our last slide here is how can I make Boston, advocate for it to be more accessible. So advocating for a barrier-free environment, that means like exercise your right to file complaints and make sure you're holding these entities accountable. If you're seeing placard abuse, if you're seeing blocked pathways, if you're seeing that there's a building that has a step and no ramp, like just file your complaints and do that as often as you see fit, because it's your right to do that. And without doing that, buildings, either they don't know or they're not going to pay attention to it. So it's really important for the people who are impacted the most by it to advocate for that environment to be barrier free, and use the forms, use the complaint forms, and keep doing it until something happens. Encourage participation. So this support group is great. I would encourage all of you guys, if you're able to or have the time to sign up for our newsletter and keep an eye out for the events that we do here in the city that are open for folks to come to. Invite friends and family and things like that, because we want to encourage participation for not just people with disabilities, but also the communities around them, so they can learn more about what it's like to live in an environment that isn't accessible, and hopefully get them to also be those advocates for those barrier-free environments and be the ones to file complaints on the behalf of somebody, a disabled family member. And keep engaging with each other, asking questions, going to things like this, or asking for more folks to come in and give presentations. All that good stuff are great ways to continue to make Boston a more accessible place. And that is the end of my presentation. I think right on time, 45 minutes. This is our contact information. Our office is in City Hall room 967, and our phone number is there as well. And again, to stay up to date on all of our local disability news, as well as events that we host, you can sign up for our newsletter by visiting our website, boston.gov/disability, and then scrolling down to the bottom of the page.